Quick disclaimer, this is going to be a friendly, non-toxic, power scaling conversation on ZORO. I guess it's not gonna work out too well, but we'll see how it goes. But this is a subject I'm actually pretty interested in, even though I don't really do much power scaling. And if this video does well, I might do an entire series based off the Straw Hats and their potential strengths. So be sure to hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm. I wanted to start off with ZORO because he's the only Straw Hat with a dream that has like completely to do with strength. Like it's literally him trying to become the world's strongest swordsman. Like he doesn't have to study medicine or learn history or draw maps, he just has to keep getting stronger until he's the strongest. Now that isn't to say like Luffy's ambition isn't greater and becoming Pirate King doesn't require strength and doesn't require a lot more, because you do have that moment with Mihawk saying Luffy's ambition and goal is definitely even gonna be harder, but that's a completely different topic. Today we're focusing on ZORO. And to really break this down, we have to look at what ZORO's true goal is. And I know I just said it has to do with pretty much just all being strength, but it's not as simple as it seems. Obviously the one he's trying to surpass is Mihawk. He said that time and time again. It's the reason he went out to sea, is to find Mihawk and try to fight him and defeat him to claim that title of the world's greatest swordsman. But even Mihawk's title is like a complicated one, even though he was properly introduced as the world's greatest swordsman when we first saw him. It's like a complicated thing where like who's actually considered swordsman and how strong is he, and you get into the debate of like Mihawk versus Shanks, which is a very controversial one as well. And I'm not gonna get into this topic too much, but in my personal opinion, Mihawk, obviously his strength is no joke. I think he is definitely one of the strongest people within the One Piece world. Like he has the title of the greatest swordsman, he has to be absurdly strong. At the same time, I'm not willing to like say he's the strongest person in all of One Piece or anything like that, because one moment in particular always jumps out to me, and that is why Mihawk went to Marineford. Doflamingo at the time asked Mihawk, why is somebody like you at a war like this? And he said, I really wanted to test the distance between that man and us, and that man being Whitebeard, the strongest man in the world at the time. And that right there, the distinction between Whitebeard and Mihawk, one being the strongest man in the world and one being the strongest swordsman in the world, was really the difference there. Because you might say Whitebeard's not a swordsman, but at the same time, I know he wields like a naginata, it's not like an actual sword, but at the same time, that naginata is a Mato sword and one of the 12 supreme swords in the world. So like technically you could definitely count him as a swordsman, and Oda really hasn't come out and said and like classified what's considered a swordsman as far as I know. So at the end of the day, my takeaway is, in terms of pure swordsmanship, the greatest is Mihawk without a doubt. And that's just not talking about the ability to use a sword. That includes Haki, ability to use Armament Haki, probably Conqueror's Haki, if that has effect on physical attack as well. Like the combination of all that and like you combining all those things into your swordplay, you are considered a swordsman in my opinion if you do that. And I think Mihawk is definitely the greatest when it comes to that. But the catch is, when your power is not completely based on swordsmanship by a good amount, like say Whitebeard, like he uses a naginata, but a good amount of his power also comes from his OP Devil Fruit, or somebody like Big Mom and Kaido who just aren't swordsmen as well, they aren't considered in the same category as Mihawk, and that way you can't really take Mihawk's title as the greatest swordsman to put them above those guys. But somebody like Shanks, who as far as we know does not have a Devil Fruit and relies on his combat abilities, and he is a swordsman. He dueled a lot with Mihawk in the past, and then of course eventually he lost his arm and then he stopped dueling Mihawk because of that. I think it means Mihawk is stronger than him because Shanks is a swordsman. Like he relies on his Shore Haki and Conqueror's Haki, and maybe his Conqueror's Haki is stronger than Mihawk's. It's possible. We don't even know if Mihawk has Conqueror's Haki, but it's the whole package. Mihawk might excel in just swordsplay in general and is able to make up for that gap. Like even if Shanks is stronger at Conqueror's Haki, like the combination of his swordsplay and his Conqueror's Haki and his armament and observation of all that, I don't think that's gonna surpass Mihawk, because Mihawk is a swordsman and Shanks is a swordsman, and it's been said Mihawk is the world's greatest swordsman, so like that's a very serious title. If you're talking about somebody like Whitebeard, who yes kinda wields a sword but has a devil fruit, which probably like amounts to more than half or like around half his power, so you can't really just consider him like a full-on like swordsman at that point. So in that case, he's not being considered in the same category as Mihawk, which is why he had a title of his own of being considered the world's strongest man. And of course you have somebody like Kaido, the world's strongest creature. Maybe he's not even human, and he definitely doesn't wield a sword, so another completely separate category. I think that's a fair assessment, and that's my take on it. I haven't dived too deep into this topic, which is why I didn't want to get too deep into it, because I haven't done a lot of research. So I'm sure a lot of you have thought about this before. If there's more stuff I missed, let me know in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts on this topic, because I think it's a very interesting one. But let's get back to Zoro here and talking about his goal and like him surpassing Mihawk. And that's just one of the questions, right? Because like if we take it as base value of him trying to surpass Mihawk, and he'll be surpassing Mihawk by the end of the story, which I think definitely will happen. With just that, we get into a conversation of like, oh, is he actually stronger than Shanks then? Is he like close to Whitebeard's level? And like how strong actually is he? But it gets deeper than that, because his goal is not just Mihawk. Like sure, that's the reason he went out to sea. He found or like heard about Mihawk being the world's greatest swordsman, somebody so great, he's like, oh, that's a guy I need to surpass, and that's why he set out to sea to really test himself. If you want to go back to the dream he had with Kuena, the exact words that they mentioned over and over again is becoming the world's greatest swordsman ever. And he's also said that he wants to be great enough that his name is known in the heavens and some crazy stuff like that. Now I know that was like said by little baby boy Roronoa Zoro, so like it might not be like taken at face value, but that ambition of Zoro's definitely hasn't died out. And like, do you really expect, say he defeats Mihawk relatively soon, he's just gonna be like, oh well, okay, I defeated Mihawk, that's our dream. Kuena, we did it, we got the world's greatest swordsman title, and you know, time to just drink it up and you know, celebrate. No, like Zoro's not gonna do that. He has such a great ambition, he's not just gonna stop training after that. Like the question here is, how strong will Zoro be by the end of One Piece? And we could get another time skip later on where we see Zoro much later in the future. It's possible that we don't, but I think it could make sense that we do. So by then, like, I don't think he would have stopped training. So I think Zoro at his peak is gonna be well past Mihawk. And if we're talking about the greatest of all time, you really have to start like comparing him to the likes of Rayleigh and Roger. And Roger was somebody who was on equal footing with prime Whitebeard, as we saw in the Odin flashback. I know some people are gonna like just reject this idea right away, right? It's gonna be like, oh, Roger's the Pirate King. That's literally the legend. That's somebody like, that's Luffy's goal. Why would Zoro be able to surpass somebody of that caliber? But there is an argument here. If Zoro is trying to become the GOAT, okay? He's not just trying to become the MVP of the current timeline, he's trying to become the GOAT. That would mean surpassing every swordsman ever, right? And that kind of fits with the idea that he wants to be known by the heavens and known as like the world's greatest swordsman ever. And now we get to the classification of Roger as a swordsman, which like some of you might not agree with, but so far we haven't seen him have a devil fruit, and the only action we saw him in the Odin flashback was him wielding a sword. And not just wielding a sword, he had a named attack that he used on Odin. And some of you might not take the name attack thing that seriously, but if you go out of your way to name an attack, it means clearly that you take swordsmanship seriously and your swordsmanship skill seriously. And swordsmanship will definitely be a major trait for you, and that I think classifies you as a swordsman. So we're talking about endgame Zoro here, right? So like unless he dies or something, which I don't think is gonna happen, I think he's gonna live for a long time and he will keep training. So like peak potential Zoro with his ambition, him surpassing Roger, I could see it happening. It's kind of funny because this debate is kind of similar to like a sports debate, like if you're talking about LeBron versus MJ, because those old time legends are kind of held up at like a pedestal because people haven't like seen like what they were able to do, and it's just like trying to tell like snippets of their legends and stories when you really don't know the full story. And because they're legends, you don't really know the full details and you only ever hear the great things, right? right? So like Michael Jordan, 6 championships, never lost in the NBA finals. Like those are the things you know about MJ. But when it's somebody like LeBron, you get to see his ups and downs live because he's still playing right now. So if we're talking about somebody like Roger, literally the Pirate King, and the only flashbacks we've seen of him has been him like being dope. Meanwhile, we've seen Zoro slowly progress and him actually being a weak person at one time. It's just a neat parallel there. But speaking of progression, I want to actually talk about how Zoro could become the GOAT, right? Because his progression is actually one of the reasons I believe he could be greater than Roger. And like honestly, if we realistically think about it, like the Straw Hats progression, it's been insane. The amount of like strength jump that they've made in such a short time, and not just that either, how far they've been able to travel like in their like adventure so far, it's pretty ridiculous. And if we really think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's been fun anyway. So yeah, Zoro's growth rate has been insane, partly because he's part of the main cast of the story, but we gotta take it as it is, right? It's canon story. His potential, his growth rate, it's insane. Like if he keeps growing at this rate, peak Zoro is gonna be the strongest person of all time. The strongest swordsman of all time, not the strongest person. I'm not saying Zoro's stronger than Luffy, relax. But let's get back on Zoro's progression and how he could continue to improve, because in terms of his battles and progression, we've definitely seen some patterns. One of the things that a lot of people say about Zoro, and I've said this in the past, is that he doesn't fight enough like swordsman. But pre-time skip, the majority of his fights were swordsmen. Talking Kabaji and Orangetown, Mihawk and Baratier, that's a hell of a jump there he made. And then you have Hachi in Arlong Park. Even once he got to the Grand Line too, you had Ohm and Skypiea, T-Bone and Kaku in Enies Lobby, Ryuma's corpse in Thriller Bark, and even somebody like Das Bones who isn't a swordsman. I think that was one of the like biggest fights to his development, and we'll get into that a little more later. But yeah, pre-time skip, he did fight a lot of swordsmen, and like they all presented different skills and challenges for him, like Hachi and Kaku, both two people that used more swords than his 3-sword style. And Oda definitely hammered home pre-time skip Zoro fighting other swordsmen to present him more challenges to see how he could adapt in these situations and like improve on himself, along with giving him a bunch of other epic moments like him fighting 100 bounty hunters in Whiskey Peak, him fighting Luffy in Whiskey Peak, and then of course nothing happened. So yeah, Oda definitely tested him with swordsman pre-time skip, and it really like built into this idea of his drive and ambition, and like him saying in his first fight against Kabaji, he said, "I will not lose to any other swordsman until I become the greatest." Eventually he lost to Mihawk, of course, but even that dialogue there of him like not wanting to accept defeat and preferring death over defeat, that was a big reason he earned the respect of Mihawk. And he had that great moment where he cried and broke down and said to Luffy that he will never lose again. That was a major theme that was hammered home pre-time skip. But post-time skip, that's where it's gotten really iffy, right? The story expanded out, we're focusing on more of the world now. The Straw Hats in general have gotten a lot less focused, and Zoro hasn't really had a real fight. I mean, you had what, Hyogo, whatever his name is, hold on. I even wrote it down, but I forgot already. That's how forgettable that character was. Hyozo was the guy he fought on Fishman Island, which was the definition of like a fodder character. Like you definitely did not remember his name before I just said it. Later on, he got another epic moment in Punk Hazard by cutting Monet, but like it really wasn't him in an actual fight once again. But in Dressrosa was the first time we actually saw him get a little more shine in some challenging battles. He first had a quick clash with Fujitora where he was sent down by gravity into the ground, but was able to launch an attack back at Fujitora despite being in that state. And that skirmish ended pretty quickly, but I think it was a way of saying like, hey, Zoro could kind of like handle his own a little bit, even like getting surprised by a Navy Admiral. He's okay, he's gonna be fine, he's much stronger than before now. But the big battle he has is against Pika, and Pika, the battle against Pika is not one of my favorites because, you know, it's not like those two going head to head and duke it out. They do have several clashes, but it's never one where Zoro is like struggling or anything like that. But there is symbolism in his progression, in his fight against Pika, and that came in his final attack where he was finally able to slice that boulder and cut through Pika's haki. And once again, this ties to the Das Bones fight, which I mentioned was like probably his greatest development battle moment. He was faced with an opponent that he literally could not cut, like could not damage. And as a swordsman, if you can't cut your opponent at all, like there's no way you could win. So that was when he really had to go and think back to his training and come to like this peace of mind and like really advance his strength. That was a big moment for him. And I think his moment with Pika is the direction that Oda is going to take in terms of progression for Zoro in the future, because his moment against Pika too was the first time we got a glimpse of his training with Mihawk, and that was him learning Armament Haki and Mihawk saying until you could make your own black blade, you're not going to be able to drink. And Zoro's Haki specialty has been pointed out before by Oda as being Armament Haki, and it does make sense, like him having the strongest Armament Haki as the swordsman, like that's almost a requirement. And now that I think about it, like being the greatest swordsman, you kind of need to have the strongest Armament Haki, right? Because if somebody has stronger Armament Haki than you, then you can't really cut them at all. So like at that point, you just lost. So armament progression is definitely where Zoro is going to continue, and I think the theme of him being able to cut everything by having stronger Armament Haki is what Oda is going to focus on in terms of his development. And now in Wano, a land of samurai where we're learning a lot about Ryo, the idea of Zoro killing Kaido is of course very prevalent, and I mentioned a little bit about this in my other Zoro video, so I won't talk too much about it. But the idea of Zoro killing Kaido, I'm not against it. I could see it happening, especially what happened in the most recent chapter of the samurai being able to pierce Kaido. I kind of at least see Zoro landing a blow or like being able to slash Kaido at least, because that would be a major sign of progression, like him being able to slash the scales of Kaido, something that only Odin was able to do before. That's a big moment of development for him, and it ties back to the idea of him saying there's nothing he cannot cut. So I could definitely see us getting a Zoro wounding Kaido moment at the very least, but in terms of fight, I don't think Kaido is going to be his main fight. I think at this point, King has to be his main fight, right? Like, we are getting closer to endgame here, and I think Oda has to focus more on the Straw Hats because they are going to be achieving their dreams all pretty soon. And for Zoro, that means getting back into that theme of fighting swordsmen that are stronger than him, that present him with different challenges. And King, we saw, is a swordsman. He has a sword. He would definitely present different challenges as well. He could turn into an ancient zone that could fly. He's a top tier Yonko commander as well, and also like a completely different species that nobody knows about. So there's a lot of elements and challenges that King could definitely present Zoro in a fight. And it's definitely time that Zoro fights another challenging fight against a swordsman, and I just don't think anybody besides King is right for that. I guess Who's Who is an option, and I've always tossed that around as a possible option, but I want to see Zoro against King. Like, I just need, that would be the best one. But going beyond Wano, I think Zoro's main challenging fight is going to be against swordsman. I think Shiryu is one that makes a lot of sense with that Blackbeard matchup there. A rematch with Mihawk as well would make sense, but I don't know how that would go. Would they actually like try to kill each other there, or is it just like a fight to the death but one of them will stop beforehand, or like Zoro disarms Mihawk or something like that? A friendly duel with Shanks would be kind of interesting as well, right? Like, that would be kind of fun to see. Some people are definitely gonna get mad that I said that. It's like, oh my god, how dare you? Shanks would body Zoro. It wouldn't be even close. But yeah, that's what I think Zoro's progression and future will be on his way of becoming the GOAT. Him like getting more focus on his armament, being stronger and stronger, and him being able to cut anything, which would mean he has the strongest armament. And then of course him being presented with a variety of different challenging fights from different swordsmen. And then another thing that I want to touch on in terms of him getting newer swords, I think Emma and the Wado are two that he has to keep. Of course the Wado he's definitely not getting rid of that. And the Emma being mentioned that it could still change into a black blade, I think that's a big deal. So I think Emma and Wado, he's keeping both of them, and he's definitely going to turn both of them into a black blade. The Sandai Katetsu might get upgraded. We did just see the Nidai in Wano, so maybe he could get that somehow if the Sandai breaks or something. But I really like the idea of the Nidai going to Brook. I think that would be interesting. But yeah, the Sandai could still get upgraded, but at the same time, it's been sticking along for so long, it might just like be the last sword that Zoro keeps. I don't think he's gonna switch swords too much anymore because we are getting close to endgame. So I think his swords are pretty much locked in, and maybe we'll get one other sword to replace replace the Sandai, but that's it. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Zoro. I think it's very possible that he's gonna become the GOAT, and you know, that's his path of progression that I just mentioned. But what do you guys think? What do you think Zoro's strength will be at the end of One Piece? How strong do you think he will be? Do you think he's gonna be stronger than Roger, or am I just tripping balls here? Let me know in the comments below. But as always, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please hit that like button. Helps a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And as always, if you want to keep up to date with when I'm posting new videos or doing live streams, you gotta hit that subscribe button. By the time this video goes up, the King's Pirate Crew should be over 3,000 members, which is another major milestone. Thank you all so much for all of you who have subscribed and interacted with me in the comments, hitting that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And you know, some of you have been stuck around for like since I had like 100 subs. I really appreciate you all so much. But let's keep it going. Our next big goal is at 5,000, Discord at 5K. Help us get there. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell to join the crew as well. Follow me on Twitter. I'm DKing4. I got a video for you right there, playlist for you right there, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.